everybody. So this video is walking you guys through your first essay assignment. And in these kind of early texts that we're looking at post-Civil War, you guys have looked at a number of different accounts of what constitutes the quote-unquote American experience from different voices and different experiences. So kind of keeping in mind the events that took place post-Civil War all the way up to World War I, what you're going to do in this sort of very short literary analysis is pretty simple. So the prompt here, basically you're going to choose one of the authors and works that you read in Unit 1. So you're going to write a short analysis of that work, looking at least one literary element within the work. So looking at, say, symbolism, tone, metaphor, whatever it might be. Contextualize that work. Think about how that fits within sort of this larger historical situation. Looking at what are the details, say, from the era or from the author's biography that kind of show that idea. So think about the lectures that I've done. Think about things like what I've said about Zit Khalasa and her biography and how that plays into her experiences that are portrayed through the text. So some questions to kind of think about. How does that author and work show social, political, or economic change happening in America at this time? How does that author or work fit or not fit within this quote-unquote new American identity? And then how does the author or work and work shape those new, so how did they themselves help shape these new quote-unquote American ideals? So some ideas you might think about are things like in Song of Myself. How is, say, Whitman celebrating the idea of the individual post-Civil War? How does that change our perspective of what an American truly is? Or in Chopin's song of Story of an Hour, how does the idea of gender relationships or dynamics, or a sort of a feminist reading of the story, how does that help shape this idea of what an American is? Because remember, at this time, women didn't even have voting rights, right? Or you might think about someone like Zit Khalasa from a sort of a native perspective, also from a female author perspective. Think about how her writing helped shape what it is to understand the American identity from a native perspective. And as the changing landscape happens to the West, and as people are pushed out of their homes or have forced assimilation into certain cultures, how does that fit or not fit with this ideal of what it is to be an American? So lots of things you can think about. What I don't want you to do is try and write about too much. It's a very short essay, as you'll see. That's why I kind of want you guys to think about this through the lens of literary analysis. So most importantly, I don't want this to become a biographical essay, and I don't want this to be a history essay. So again, go back to the lectures, look at how I analyze the text. Most importantly, that's the key. And secondarily, think about the historical context or the biographical context. So for example, if you're looking at Zit Khalasa, you might look at the symbolism of, say, the telephone pole, or the symbolism of losing her hair. What does that represent as far as this idea of, what it means to be, an American, as a female, as a Native person? Is she considered an outsider? Is she considered an insider? With Whitman, you might look at something like imagery. So you might look at the imagery that he uses to kind of portray these ideals of what it is to be an American in this new supposedly free landscape. So make sure you have a clear, definitive thesis claim and argument that you're making about the text, most importantly, and main ideas in your body paragraphs. So your intro should have a thesis claim with those main ideas. And each of those sort of points within the body of the essay as your main idea, you should expand on that with good evidence from the text, meaning quotes. So you want to pull in specific quotes that show something happening. So if I am talking, say, for example, about the telephone pole as a key symbol in Zit Khalasa's narrative, then I need to pull in quotes where she's talking specifically about the telephone pole and then explain why that's actually, showing a certain idea of progress or the idea of encroachment on the land. So that's really key. You always want to back up your claims, back up your analysis with evidence from the text, but then you want to explain why that's showing something. So again, you have three choices here. We have Whitman, Chopin, or Zit Khalasa, Song of Myself, Story of an Hour, or School Days of an Indian Girl. Your essay needs to be at least 1.5 pages. So I say 1.5 to 2 pages to give you guys a range. You can always write more. You just can't write less. If you write less, you will have points taken off. So 1.5 to 2 pages in length, due by Sunday, September 5th by 11:59 p.m. And remember that everything is checked for plagiarism. Sorry, it's not safe to sign anymore. It's turned it in. But everything is checked for plagiarism. And then you guys have access to those plagiarism reports. And note that the page requirements, of course, like I said, needs to the middle of the second page at minimum. So you're going to be assessed on making sure you have good close analysis of the literary work and its major concepts, as well as secondarily an understanding of sort of the historical context, whether that's the author's identity or the historical background of what was happening in the era. But again, really, really important. Analyze the text first. Secondarily, look at the history or the historical context. I don't want this to become a biography essay, and I don't want it to become a history essay. Make sure, again, you have lots of good evidence from the text to support your claims in the form of quotes. Now, paraphrases are always fine, but in general, quotes are much stronger forms of evidence and proof to help support your analysis than paraphrasing. So always kind of err toward the sides of quotes if you can. Proper page length, MLA, of course, and citations. So MLA means that you have a header in the top left corner that has your name, my name, the course and section number, and the date. It has a title, and it has your name in the top right with page numbers, or just page numbers in the top right. It needs to be double-spaced, Times New Roman, Cambria, Arial, Calibri font, and make sure that you also have it double-spaced and 1-inch margins all around. So that's MLA in a nutshell. Now you are not required to use any sources for this essay. If you want to, you're more than welcome to include a source or two, a credible source, of course. If you do, you need to include that on the bibliography. Otherwise, you should also have a bibliography which includes the citation for whichever text you chose to analyze. Do note that the bib does not count towards your page length requirements. So again, make sure you have a fully developed essay structure with an intro and a thesis claim, clear main ideas with evidence, and a conclusion. Your conclusion really should kind of wrap up your essay, but it should also kind of restate your thesis and your main ideas just in new words. So you don't want to copy and paste it directly, but what you're doing is basically wrapping up the argument and saying, this is how I showed you X, Y, and Z. And then everything should be carefully and clearly organized. So some ideas, some things you can think about as far as literary elements that you can talk about when writing your analysis. And again, I highly recommend you kind of keep it very narrow and focused to maybe 1 or 2 things, not a whole bunch. But think about archetypes. If you're looking at characterization, think about archetypes, think about protagonists, antagonists. Are they, flat? Are they round? Are they dynamic? Are they, developed characters or not? Look at literary devices like similes, personifications, metaphor, foreshadowing, flashback, irony. And you can also look at things like the structure. So what's the conflict? Is it man versus man? Is it man versus society? Look at the dramatic arc, the rising action, the climax, the falling action. You can also look at the point of view, the narrator. Is it third person? Is it first person? Is it third person omniscient? What is the structure and what's the purpose behind that? So for example, Zikala is very different than, say, Chopin's, but for a very different effect and reason. You can look at literary concepts like themes, motifs, allusions, symbols, and then you can also, like I said, secondarily look at things like the historical context. So look at the events that were surrounding the text. Look at the social, ethical, or moral issues that are being discussed, the economic situation, so on and so forth. So this is purposefully broad because I want you guys to talk about A, the text that's of most interest to you, and B, the concept or idea within that text that is of most interest to you. So if you want to read Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour and talk about the symbolism or, the dialogue to show the relationship dynamics between the two genders, something like that would be really strong. For Zit Khalasa, like I said, there's a number of different ways you can kind of read that text. Choose what is of most interest to you, and let me know if you have any questions at all as you kind of start thinking about how to write this essay.